Hey guys, Bound to Divide here with Ableton Tips, and today I'm going to be taking you through 3 Afterlife style leads, and I'm just going to show you how they sound now. So this is the first one. Okay, so the first one is this Cassian Landa one, and I'm just going to turn off all the effects and show you how it was made from the ground up. Okay, and I'm just going to turn down the volume because it's going to be really loud without all the filtering. Alright, so when you start out, the synth is originally set up with this sort of routing. So if you click on this tab, we just want to set it to parallel, and that means that all of these oscillators are going to get routed straight out to the filter. They're not going to be affecting each other. In the original routing, they're doing something called FM, which is controlling the frequency of each oscillator below it using the frequency of the oscillator above it. So we just want to route it out parallel and set the voices to 1 so that it's a mono synth, and that's so that the release tails don't wash over each other. Okay, and then the envelope is got an 8 millisecond attack, just so it's a bit of a longer attack, it's not so sudden. And then we're going to be adding in some white noise. So here we add white noise, and the envelope doesn't change at all. We bring in the level at -19. Alright, next up we want the LFO to give it that nice wobbling sound. And so you need to just switch this on, make sure it's set to sine wave, and retrigger is on because we want it to sound the same each time. It'll tend to sound slightly different each time it plays if you don't retrigger the LFO. Alright, and then set the rate to 122 and the amount to 75%. So originally you'll see it's probably routed to the filter, and we don't want the filter to be being modulated by the LFO. What we want is the amplitude, and to control the amplitude or the volume, you go to destination B here and set this to volume and set this amount to 100% here, and then you get that wobbling sound. I don't know what to call it, like tremolo kind of effect. Alright, and then we go into filter, and that's just to take out some of the high end, and we want just the start of the sound to be bright, and that's why it's a really short, snappy envelope. The attack's at 1.9 milliseconds and decay at 80 milliseconds. So you can hear the beginning of the sound's got this like brightness, the first few milliseconds, and then it gets a bit darker. Just going to turn this back up a bit. Alright, and then we go into a pitch envelope, and the pitch envelope's just helping the attack of the sound get a bit more of a punch to it. I can exaggerate it so you can hear it more. Okay, and to set this up, we're basically using a negative envelope. So we have the peak set to -8 and the decay set to 40 milliseconds. Originally, when you set this up, it'll look something like this and sound like this. So we want to make this a negative envelope. And then dial in the decay to where it's just creating a bit of punch. We're not really hearing the pitch. Something like that. Okay, and then, yeah, that's it. So next we're going into EQ8, and that's just cutting out some low end. Then we're saturating the sound with 10 dB of drive and reducing the output by -8. And that will add some low end back in, so you can see that here. So we just need to take out that rumble again, and then we're adding some reverb. Okay, next up is this Drown Massano remix. And this one was a really tough one to figure out, and that's simply because this kind of acid sound typically comes from the Roland TB303, and that's probably what they used for this, but I'm not really sure what synth they used, and each synth that you try this on will sound completely different. Just the character of the filter sounds so different. So this does sound slightly different to the original if you compare them side by side, but the general process of creating it probably was very similar to what I've done, and I guess the sound is kind of similar. So I tried out every single stock Ableton synth for this, and the only one that could actually get the sound out of it was analog. Wavetable doesn't even at all make the kind of filtered drive that you're hearing. So yeah, let me take you through the sound. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off the filter and oscillator. So we're starting off with just a saw wave, and it's at a really low octave. It's playing that low D. And sorry, I forgot to mention or show you the MIDI for this one here. Let me just show you that in case you wanted to try and copy it. There's the MIDI. You can see all the notes here. Let's jump back to this one. So yeah, we're starting with this low D note, and this is what the MIDI looks like. And oh, let me turn all of this off. Okay, and we're adding in a second oscillator here, which is pitched 1 octave up. Here you can see plus 12 semitones. And then we're going to be going into this filter, and the filter is doing most of the magic. Just to quickly show you, the amp envelope I have a decay of 6.29 seconds, and that was just because I was tweaking so much, but it doesn't actually sound any different to having the sustain at 1. So you could just set the sustain to 1 and you don't have to worry about the decay. Alright, so here is where the magic happens with the filter. Okay, so how this works is you have basically a filter. If we can just visualize a filter, like the auto filter here, and as it follows the shape of this envelope, it's doing this basically. It's just opening and closing. But how you get that really nice character, that distortion, is by using filter drive. You can see there's filter drive modes over here. You can add like MS2 and different ones on auto filter, but that's not super important because we're not even using the auto filter. I'm just using this to describe what's happening with the filter. So here we're cranking the resonance up on this by using this res mod. So that's set to 3.61. And that's increasing the resonance when the filter's fully open. And then as this automates back down or modulates back down, the resonance is decreasing. And we have a ton of drive on it. And so it's distorting everything at the cutoff point. And that's basically the thought process for making this sound. And that's what we've done here. So this filter has different drive models here, and they basically increase in intensity as you go through them. So you can hear it's not very intense, a lot more intense, and that's probably the most intense. And I found this one just had the nicest character for the sound. Okay, so we bring the frequency down to 70, and that just means that the filter is going to be at 70 hertz at its lowest point, and then at its highest point, well, I don't know what it's going to be. The envelope amount is just set to 3.02. So if I bring this down, we're not hearing any filter movement. As I move it up, we start hearing a lot of filter movement. And you can hear how much just adjusting this envelope amount affects the character of the sound. You get like completely different tones out of it. So, I mean, I probably sat here for like 2 hours just playing with all these different settings, playing with the attack and the decay, the envelope amount, the res mod amount, and every slight adjustment you make completely changes the sound. So you really got to like sit there and just tweak and tweak and tweak until you're happy. Okay, so the resonance is set to 7%, and how we're controlling it and boosting it up at the top of this envelope is by using this envelope amount here, res mod envelope amount. So as I move that up, you'll hear the resonance increases and therefore the distortion increases. And I had that at 3.02, I think. Yeah, 3.61. Okay, so the attack and decay settings are super important. You'll hear if I adjust these at all, it changes the sound completely. And same with the sustain, you'll get like a very different character out of it. Okay, and then I think that's it for the synth portion of it. Next we go into this EQ8, and that's just boosting the high end a little bit. Can barely hear the change. And then this overdrive helps quite a lot, and that's going to be distorting the sound once again, like the entire signal. So that makes it like really nice and dirty. And the dry wet's at 16% here, the drive's at 48%. Then EQ8 is taking out some of that nastiness down in the low end. Just cleaning it up. Doing some more cleaning up. And then we saturating it. And then we're going into a delay. So the delay, just need to basically play with this to cut out all the high end. So just moving it around in here. And then the left and right are unlinked, and then you have 4 and 3. So the left and right are doing different things. And then we have a reverb over here. And you're basically just making this reverb nice and dark by using this input EQ over here and the diffusion EQ over here. Just reducing the low end and a bit of the high end. And then the decay time's 9 seconds, the size is 74, and the dry wet's at 12%. Okay, then some final EQing. Just to take out a bit more of that like muddiness. Could maybe reduce this a little bit.
Hi, this video is sponsored by us. If you like these tutorials and want to support the channel, check out our website packed with online courses and professional sound packs. If you want to cut years of your learning curve, check the PML Beginner to Advanced Music Production program for Ableton Live. You will know Ableton inside out and learn how to write, produce, mix and master complete tracks. You learn step by step at your own speed, from an empty file to professional production, as if we're sitting side by side in the studio. Thank you for listening, and now let's get back to your tutorial.
Okay, so that's that sound, and then the last one's a bit more of like a ravey sound, and in the original song there's like a section where it's closed like this, and there's a section where it's open. I just linked them together and kind of automated them so that you could hear the range of the sound. And so the thought process behind this sound is just to make something really detuned and noisy and kind of like old school ravey. And so let me take you through how we did that. Turn one of these off. Okay, I'm going to turn off the filter, the second oscillator, and I'm just going to bring down this to 0. And we're going to turn off the unison. Okay, so now we just have a basic shape here. There's just a saw wave. And we're adding in a second oscillator. And so this is a white noise oscillator, but it's a wavetable, so it's not actually generating white noise. It's just basically freezing the waveform in a single cycle and then repeating that cycle. So it doesn't sound like white noise, but it still has a bit of the character of white noise, which is what I wanted. And if we have a look at the amp envelope, we're doing a decay of 430 milliseconds and sustain of -6. And you can see I have this macro mapped to multiple things. I'm going to take you through the macro mapping at the end of the sound design stage. Don't worry too much about these things moving around with the green dot, because I will show you them at the end of this. Okay, so next we're going into this filter. And you can see the frequency is brought all the way down to 29. And then what we're doing is we're using this envelope 2 shape to control the filter. And you can map that here in the matrix by clicking on frequency and then setting the envelope 2 amount to 78. And then if you click on envelope 2 here, we can go in and shape that. I've set the global amount to 0 just so that you can hear how the sound sounds without that. But I'm going to bring that back up to 100 now. So that's how this should sound now for you. So your sound might not be as snappy and distorted as mine, or driven, and that's just because I'm using this MS2 filter here. That enables filter drive, so you can turn up the drive here. Originally it'll sound like this. Then we set MS2 and just bring up the drive. Okay, and then another thing that I'm modulating here, you can see envelope 3 is modulating the pitch. So if we click on envelope 3, it's a really tight envelope, set to 7 milliseconds. And we're modulating it by 18. And that's just going to create a little bit more punch on the sound. And then the final part of the sound is to enable this noise unison, and that's going to give it that really nice detune. And especially when the filter's open. And that's set to 70%. So that really makes it like nice and ravey and detuned. Okay, let's go over the macro setup that I did over here. So when you initially have this wavetable open, you'll have to hit Control G, and then it'll dump it into this instrument rack where you'll have macros available. So it'll probably look something like this. And then what we do is we click on Map, and that opens up this mappings window. And then we can click on certain parameters and map them. So what I've done is I've clicked on the frequency over here, a frequency cutoff over here, and you can see here that's mapped. You see all our different mappings here, and we can set the minimum and maximum amounts. So if you click on that and then you map it to, you just basically click like this, it'll map it to, I'm using macro 1, but I'll just show you again with macro 2. So we can map it to macro 2, and then we set the positive and negative amounts. We want the minimum amount to be 20 Hertz and the maximum probably 20,000. And then when we start to move this, it'll move the filter open and closed. Oh, sorry, this one will open the filter. Okay, so that's just showing you how to do the mappings. I'm just going to undo what I've done and bring it all back to how it was. Okay, so now I'm just going to take you through all the different mappings that we have over here. So the first one is oscillator to gain. So under oscillator 2, you click on this one and then you map it. And we have the minimum amount at 0 dB and the maximum at -infinity. So as we turn this up, this dial goes down. And that's because when this filter's open, I don't want to hear this white noise oscillator anymore. And then the next one is this filter frequency, and I've already shown you that. So at the minimum amount, we want it at 20 Hertz, and the maximum we want it at 10 kilohertz. And then the next mapping is envelope 2, sustain. So if we go to envelope 2, you can see you can click on the S over here and map it to macro 1. And then as I move this up, we want the sustain to increase. And so here the amounts, 50% and 100%. And then the last mapping is envelope 3 decay. So envelope 3, if you remember, is controlling the pitch attack. So at the start of the sound has this nice like little pitchy sound to it. But what happens when you open up that filter is you really start to hear that pitch a lot more. So what I wanted to do was just decrease the decay time so that it becomes inaudible. So it gets decreased to 1.5 milliseconds. You can see the maximum is 1.5 milliseconds, the minimum is 9 milliseconds. So you can see that envelope close. Okay, then I'm just going to re-enable automation, and you can see the automation that I did over here. So the macro starts to open up towards the end. Okay, so that's it for the mapping of the macros and for all the sound design within the synth. Okay, then next up we're going into an OTT. And that's just compressing the whole signal and bringing up frequencies that were quiet and toning down frequencies that were loud. Basically just flattening out the sound a bit. But it's only in a small amount here, 33%. You can exaggerate it to hear what it's doing. Just makes it sound very compressed. So I'm just mixing it in just a bit. And then I didn't want it as wide, so I'm using utility to bring down the width to 20%. And then EQ8 to take out some of that low end. And a little bit of a roll off on the top. And then some reverb. And then a delay. Probably should have put the delay before the reverb. Okay, and that's it for this entire sound. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned a thing or two, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.